The anniversary dinner was supposed to be a celebration, a night to relive our 15 years of marriage. I had reserved a private room in our favorite restaurant, had a bouquet of roses waiting, and even managed a few words of affection scribbled on a card I'd chosen carefully. But that card would soon feel like a lie. Little did I know that the woman sitting across from me knew more about our marriage than I ever wanted her to. It started with a look. My wife Julia had that look tonight. It wasn't the gleam of happiness or pride. It was something else, a gleam of satisfaction, yet cold and accusing. I hadn't yet picked up on what it meant until, mid-dinner, she sighed and pulled out her phone. She placed it on the table between us, the screen facing me. "I found something," she said, her voice deceptively calm. "A picture. No, several pictures. A wedding. Not ours." I froze. The silence hung between us, loud with accusations. It was a small ceremony. No frills. A modest bride and groom stood beneath a plain arch. The bride's face was new to me, her eyes soft with trust and innocence, exactly what had attracted me 15 years ago to someone else, the woman sitting across from me now. My heart pounded as I looked at my wife. Her expression didn't waver. "That was 15 years ago," she murmured, her voice laced with a calm so cold it sent a chill through me. "Same year you proposed to me." Her words landed with the force of an avalanche. I tried to speak, to defend myself, to explain, but nothing came out. My mind was racing, dredging up memories I'd long buried and tried to forget. I could feel the weight of the truth looming, but I couldn't say it. Not then. She wouldn't let me. Julia started to recount everything she'd uncovered, every little detail. She'd spent months unraveling it. My absences, business trips, unexplained expenses, pieces I thought I'd hidden so well. But Julia was persistent. She didn't miss a thing. I couldn't run from the truth she'd carefully pieced together. Not tonight. And then she played the video. There I was, looking into the camera with my second wife, giving a toast, promising forever. The realization hit me, an almost physical blow. She wasn't asking me for explanations. She didn't want apologies. She just wanted me to sit there and realize she knew it all. And in that moment, I felt stripped bare, as though every lie, every excuse I'd ever told had been lined up and thrown back at me, one by one. "Happy anniversary," she said finally, her voice barely a whisper, but loaded with the weight of everything I'd hidden. She stood up, leaving me there in the quiet. And with every passing second, the truth I had run from felt like it was swallowing me whole, as though the life I'd kept in fragments was caving in. I sat there paralyzed, staring at the empty chair across from me. My wife, my only wife now, I suppose, had left, and with her all pretense. The restaurant was suddenly too quiet, the clinking glasses and murmuring voices around me becoming an unbearable backdrop to the storm brewing in my mind. A million thoughts raced through my head, but none louder than the question, what would happen next? I had no plan, no script for how to explain this. I thought back to the day I married her, 15 years ago. A small part of me had felt guilty even then. I'd told myself I'd find a way out of the life I'd built before her. I'd convinced myself that Julia was different, that she was my true future. Yet here I was, exposed, caught between two broken lives. The second I got home, the emptiness hit me. Her things were still there, but the place felt stripped of warmth. I could feel the weight of her absence in the cold silence, the way the air felt stifled, as though every room held a piece of her anger, her disappointment. I headed to our bedroom, the walls adorned with pictures of vacations, anniversaries, holiday gatherings. the proof of our life together, the life I had crafted and then split in two. On the bed lay a single envelope, my name written on it in her handwriting. I hesitated, my hand hovering over it. I wasn't sure I wanted to read what she'd written, but curiosity and a sense of impending doom compelled me. I tore it open and unfolded the letter. Martin, I don't want answers. I don't want apologies. I want you to know that I loved you, fiercely and completely, and I thought we were building a life that meant something. But now I see it was built on a lie. You shattered us, shattered me, and there's no fixing this. I hope wherever you end up, you remember the love I gave to you and the trust you've destroyed. I hope it stays with you, as I know this betrayal will stay with me. Goodbye, Julia. The words blurred in my vision, my hands trembling. There was no more hiding, no more lies. For years I'd kept up an elaborate facade, a tangled web that I thought I could control. But in the end, it had caught me. I had always believed I could keep my lives separate, my secrets safe. But that night, with one letter, she had shown me just how wrong I was. As I sat there, alone in the emptiness, I understood the true weight of what I had done. My double life, carefully orchestrated, had cost me everything real, everything meaningful. And now, there was nothing left but regret, and the haunting knowledge that I would never be able to escape the life I had so carelessly destroyed. I stayed awake all night, replaying every moment in my mind. The deceit, the years of keeping two lives apart, the decision I'd made so long ago to marry Julia, knowing full well I'd never really left my past behind. Her letter haunted me, each word sinking deeper as I sat alone in our empty house. The quiet was heavy, oppressive. It felt as though the walls themselves were pressing in on me, judging me for the things I'd done. By morning, exhaustion finally pulled me under, and I woke to the harsh light of day streaming through the blinds. I reached for my phone, out of habit more than anything, and saw an avalanche of missed calls, texts, voicemails, some from mutual friends, others from family. People had started to hear whispers of the truth. Julia hadn't confronted me privately. She'd left just enough breadcrumbs for the right people to connect the dots, as if to make sure that my lies would follow me everywhere. And she'd done it subtly, without the theatrics I might have expected. My phone buzzed in my hand. A message from my sister popped up. I just spoke to Julia, it read. She told me everything. I felt the bottom drop out from under me. I called her back, my fingers clumsy, but she didn't answer. In her place was a single voicemail. Martin, my sister's voice said, heavy with disappointment. I always thought you were better than this. I don't know what happens now, but don't expect anyone to understand. I sat in silence, letting her words sink in. There was no sympathy in her voice, just hurt, disappointment, echoes of what Julia must have felt, magnified by betrayal. With nowhere else to turn, I found myself driving, mindlessly, the scenes outside blurring together as my thoughts twisted and turned. I ended up near the church where Julia and I had been married. A place that had once held so much hope now felt like a cruel reminder of my failures. I parked and sat, watching people go in and out, completely unaware of the devastation churning within me. A sudden memory of our wedding day hit me, clear as glass. Julia in her dress, laughing as I struggled with the ring. The way she'd looked at me with absolute faith, an unshakable belief that we were destined for a life of love and loyalty. She had given herself to me without hesitation, without holding anything back. And in return, I'd given her a version of myself that had never been whole. I thought about my other life, about the secrets I'd woven for years to keep it intact. And now, it seemed so pointless, a wasted, hollow effort, all that energy spent on deception when I could have been living honestly, fully present with Julia. But it was too late. My choices had caught up to me, and they'd taken her trust, her love with them. As the sun began to set, I realized I'd lost not only my wife, but any sense of who I thought I was. Julia's letter, her calm and composed exit, had shown me just how much I had taken for granted. And now, as I sat there alone, I understood the one truth I'd run from all these years. In trying to keep two lives, I'd lost both. In the weeks that followed, life turned into a strange, unbearable limbo. Julia had cut off all communication, and she'd vanished in a way that left no trace. She'd moved out of our house, filed for divorce, and, in her own quietly devastating way, made it known that she wanted nothing to do with me again. The isolation was unbearable, like a ghostly weight pressing down on my chest. I wanted to explain myself, to apologize, but there was no one left who would listen. The silence became an unlikely teacher, forcing me to confront the tangled wreckage of my life. I spent hours walking through the empty house, haunted by the memories that clung to every room. Our kitchen, where we'd cooked countless meals, now looked desolate. The couch where we'd watched movies together felt cold, and the bed was a reminder of a warmth that had once been there, but was gone forever. I couldn't escape it. Every corner seemed to taunt me with reminders of what I had shattered. One night, desperate and unable to sleep, I found myself reaching out to my other wife, Melissa. I hadn't spoken to her since everything had unraveled. Part of me thought that maybe I could salvage something from that relationship, that I could rebuild in one direction, since the other had crumbled beyond repair. Melissa picked up on the first ring, her voice hesitant but steady. I could tell she'd heard something, the rumors that Julia's quiet revelations had set into motion. There was no warmth, no sympathy, just a detached calm that felt colder than any anger ever could. "So it's true then?" she asked. "All those business trips, the nights you said you were working late. You were with her?" I tried to explain, but the words felt hollow even as I spoke them. Excuses, half-hearted attempts to justify the unjustifiable. I could hear the fatigue in her voice, the realization settling in that she, too, had been deceived, that she had loved someone who'd kept his life split in two. "Martin," she said finally, "I don't know what I thought we had, but I can't live with this. I don't want to hear from you again." With that, she hung up, and a suffocating silence filled the room. For the second time, I found myself utterly alone. Days bled into weeks, and each one left me more disconnected, as if I were watching my own life unravel from the outside. Friends distanced themselves. Whispers followed me wherever I went, and the colleagues I once counted as allies now looked at me with thinly veiled contempt. I was a pariah, caught in the trap I'd set for myself. Everywhere I turned, I saw reminders of the life I'd destroyed with my own hands. Eventually, I left town. I packed a few belongings, closed the door on the hollow shell that had once been my home, and drove aimlessly, without a plan or destination. I found myself in a small, anonymous town a few states away, renting a room where no one knew me, where I could try to disappear. In that small, empty room, I began to understand that my exile was not just from my old life, but from the very person I had become. The man who had so effortlessly lied to the women who loved him, who had built two lives on a foundation of secrets, was gone. What was left was someone stripped down, someone who had lost everything that mattered. As the days stretched on, I learned to live with the silence, with the weight of my own mistakes pressing down on me. I knew now that I couldn't change what I'd done, and I couldn't go back. Julia's words, her letter, lingered in my mind, an indelible reminder of what I had taken for granted. I was left with a single, undeniable truth. In my endless quest to keep everything, I had lost everything worth having. And as I sat alone, in that room where no one knew my name, I finally accepted the punishment I had so carefully earned. Months passed, blending together in a monotony of quiet regret and isolation. I had no one left to lie to, no stories to maintain, just an empty existence defined by echoes of a life I'd shattered with my own hands. Julia's letter stayed with me, the memory of her words a relentless reminder of the love I'd wasted, the life I had ruined. In those solitary months, I had one last honest conversation, one I had avoided my entire life. I looked in the mirror, and I told myself the truth. There were no more excuses, no more hiding behind the personas I'd juggled. The man who looked back at me was hollow, unrecognizable, a stranger who had once been a husband, a friend, a respected man, but had destroyed it all. I wrote letters to Julia and Melissa, my final apologies. I knew they'd likely never read them, but it felt like the only way to bring some sort of closure to the wreckage I had left behind. I didn't ask for forgiveness. How could I? But I needed them to know that I understood the weight of my betrayal, that I would carry it for the rest of my days. The quiet town I had escaped to became my new prison, the faces around me unfamiliar, uninterested. There was no one to judge me here, no one to look at me with hurt or betrayal, and yet I felt the weight of my own guilt more heavily than ever. I had wanted so much, grasped for everything, and lost it all because I had never learned to live honestly, to commit fully, to truly love. One evening, I took a final walk through the town. The streets were quiet, the sky darkening into twilight, and I realized that this too was my end, a life reduced to solitude devoid of meaning, where the only person left to blame was myself. I had come face to face with the truth of my choices, the full impact of my deceit, and there was no escaping it. As I turned back toward the empty room that was now my home, I knew that my punishment wasn't some dramatic fall or a public shaming. It was simply this: a life that could never be rebuilt, a future that would forever carry the weight of the past. I had lost both the women who had once loved me, but in the end, the most devastating loss was losing the man I could have been. And so I returned to that small, silent room where my only company was regret. I closed the door, finally understanding the true meaning of isolation, and resigned myself to a life defined by a truth I could never escape. I had been my own undoing.